colleague Rich over on EMBN believes that a trail bike is the essence of MTB, that 140, 150 mil travel is the perfect amount of travel, which might well be very true for an MTB, but let's face it, an eMTB is very different. Now, inasmuch as the parameters might well be very similar, after all, we are looking for bikes that blend uphill with downhill capability, the specifications might actually be quite different. So I believe the sweet spot is actually quite different to an MTB. Why is this? Well, quite simply, an eMTB will move faster, it will climb steeper, and actually descend more frequently than an MTB. Okay, let's focus. Now, the question we're attempting to answer, is there a sweet spot when it comes to eMTB travel? Now, first of all, we need to look at the range of bikes that we're talking about, because we've got this slinky little number here at 18 kilos, this KTM cross-country bike, to this 23 kilo rock and route vandalizing 170 mil travel canyon. So we've got quite a wide range of bikes, but before we start, it's worth bearing in mind the wide range of rider skill. Yes, before we get into the nitty-gritty, it's worth noting that more travel is not always the ultimate goal, although it is simply a means to tackling ever more technical challenges and to freedom. And there is a misconception that accumulating more travel will lead to ability in such places, which is untrue. The real journey to conquering such places begins with investing in yourself, your skills, and your knowledge. I really do think that the skill and finesse of the rider has a part to play rather than bludgeoning your way downhill with ever more millimeters of suspension travel. Actually, some of the favourite bikes I've ridden in the past 12 months have been shorter travel. Bikes such as the Kelly's R60 and the Neuron Fly. Rider skill then, a key part in finding the sweet spot of suspension travel. The next point is quality, and in no way am I suggesting that more money is necessarily going to buy you more quality. What I will say is that in terms of rear suspension, a good shock tune which has parity with a really good suspension design is critical. I mean, it sounds so easy, right? Now, when it comes to the fork, bear in mind that fork travel is linked to chassis size. A lot of the time, increased travel means bigger forks, when in actual fact, a lot of people might actually want a shorter travel fork with maybe a wider stanchion. This is especially true for maybe larger riders on eMTB bikes. Time now to turn our attention to the range of suspension travel that we have available to us. A lot of brands actually build their bikes around the forks that are available on the market. So we've got bikes which range from 120 mil travel up to around about 180 mil travel. And the type of bike within that range goes from bikes which are cross-country, trail bikes, all mountain up to super enduro. Now, if you look on screen now, Fox is an example of a fork supplier. We've got a 32 millimeter stanchion fork, a 34, which is more for trail and cross-country use, up to the all mountain 36 and the 180 mil travel enduro fork. So, as I mentioned, brands build bikes around forks. Brands further build classifications around these forks. The cross-country, trail, all-mountain, enduro, downhill classes. Question is, do these traditional MTB classifications apply to eMTB? I'm not so sure. It still hasn't stopped many brands using them, or indeed adding even more. Urban cross, super enduro. It's interesting actually that many brands have ditched those classifications, especially when it comes to eMTB. But look, this isn't helping you with a sweet spot when it comes to the amount of travel, is it? So what is the ideal amount? Well, like I said, Rich thinks that a 140, 150 mil trail is the MTB sweet spot, the quintessential MTB. And that's because he thinks that cross-country bikes, whilst great for climbing, are not so great at descending, and that enduro bikes, great for descending, are less good at climbing. But does that apply to eMTB? No, it doesn't, because let's face it, we've got a motor and we've got a battery and there's different amounts of travel. Still, I think what we all want to do is a bit of this and that. But actually, what's the sweet spot when it comes to doing a bit of this and a bit of that? Okay, so we might need to ask the same questions. What's best at climbing and what's best at descending? Now, the answer to that question in relation to eMTB is power, traction, geometry, and tyres when it comes to uphill. And then for downhill, you're looking at travel, geometry, and burly parts. Okay, if you were to ask me my opinion on this, I would say that a 150, 160mm travel bike will offer plenty of travel and traction on super technical climbs, whilst providing you enough support and comfort on super tech descents. That, of course, once paired with good geometry and component parts. So you see, it's not just about the amount of travel, it's a far bigger picture than that. So I think it's quite a complicated picture that we're beginning to put together here. Just going to return quickly to the whole business of rider skill, because I do believe that skilled riders have the ability to use less travel at similar speeds, and less skilled riders will actually benefit from the comfort of having a longer travel bike, especially on those technical descents. I'd like to focus now on the whole business of terrain and gradient, because I think that has a big influence in the type and travel of eMTB you're going to choose. Now, for example, if your riding is based more on traversing than pure descending, then a shorter travel bike will give you the ability to pull up on the bike more easily than a longer travel bike. You'll not have to push into the travel as much. Secondly, if you are more of a pedal up a fire road, then bosh down the descents kind of person, then longer travel might well be for you. Thirdly, the traditional MTB reasons of buying shorter travel because they are better for climbing doesn't hold true for eMTB. You actually have the potential to climb on wildly more technical and steep hills on an eMTB, so slightly longer might actually be good for you. And finally, it is actually all about the terrain. We have ridden Fox 34 Levo SLs faster than a Fox 38 180mm travel bike simply because the gradient is not steep enough. And yet, forks such as the Fox 34 will often be way overgunned on the steeper terrain. Wow, so many choices. Oh, quite dizzy. Okay, what about the wanna be in my gang syndrome? I mean, I might be joking about it, but it's actually true, right? I mean, how many people do you see maybe overbiked based on the type of terrain and the skills they have? I mean, a lot of the time, it's about what your mates ride. Now, a lot of brands actually define stiffness based on suspension travel and fork chassis. Now, this isn't always very helpful. For example, sometimes I ride the 140mm Canyon Neuron on with a 34 up front, but maybe in the summer, I might want to bolt on a 150mm 36 up front just because the speed's a bit higher. So many parameters and combinations to think about. And I think at the end of the day, like I mentioned earlier, it's about investing in yourself. It's about quality over quantity. And it's basically down to the type of terrain that you ride most of the time. And bear in mind that an eMTB can do radically different things to an MTB.